So there I was, Marcus Webb, standing in what could only be described as the universe's fanciest waiting room, wondering how my career had led me to this exact moment of cosmic humiliation. The Galactic Council station looked like someone had given 1 billion credits to an interior designer who really, really loved crystals and mood lighting. Everything glowed, everything hummed, everything screamed, "We're better than you," in that passive-aggressive way that expensive furniture does. I'd been sent as Earth's diplomatic representative, which sounds impressive until you realize they picked me because I was the only one willing to take the job after reading the briefing materials. Those materials, by the way, basically said, "Congratulations, humanity just found out we're the galactic equivalent of that participation trophy everyone pretends to appreciate but secretly pities." The doors opened with a sound like angels sighing, which I'm pretty sure was intentional because everything here was designed to make you feel inadequate. I walked into the council chamber, and let me tell you, it was like stepping into the universe's most uncomfortable diversity poster. At the head of the room sat Thrain, the council leader, who looked like someone had given sentience to a chandelier. He was a crystalline being, all facets and refracted light, and he had this way of looking at you that made you feel like he was calculating your net worth and finding it disappointing. "Welcome, human," Thrain said, his voice resonating through the chamber like he'd swallowed a gong. "We are pleased to finally meet a representative of your species." The way he said "pleased" suggested he was about as pleased as someone who'd just stepped in something unpleasant and was being polite about it. Around the chamber sat the other council members, and let me paint you a picture. To my left, there was a being made entirely of what looked like purple fog with eyes. Turned out she was a telepath who could read minds from 3 star systems away. To my right, something that resembled a mantis had mated with a Christmas tree, and he could apparently teleport. Behind them, a creature that looked like living mercury that could manipulate time itself. And then there was humanity. Our big galactic gift. We could, and I'm quoting directly from the welcome packet here, demonstrate remarkable adaptability and innovative problem-solving skills, which is diplomatic speak for, "You've got nothing, but we'll pretend there's something there to be nice." "We understand," Thrain continued, and I could hear the capital letter in understand, "that your species has recently achieved faster-than-light travel, an impressive accomplishment for a civilization without any inherent abilities." There it was. The first dig, wrapped in a compliment like an insult sandwich. "Thank you," I said, keeping my smile diplomatic, and my thoughts about where Thrain could shove his compliments to myself. "We're excited to join the galactic community." "Indeed," Thrain said, and one of his facets caught the light in a way that I swear was judgmental. "We should discuss the nature of your species' participation in council affairs, given your unique circumstances." Unique circumstances. That was going to be the theme of this whole disaster, wasn't it? It's like showing up to a superhero convention in regular clothes and having everyone ask where your costume is, except you're not wearing a costume, this is just your face, and also you can't fly. A hologram appeared in the center of the room, showing Earth rotating slowly. It looked so small here, so ordinary. Just a blue marble full of people who'd sent me to this meeting with nothing but a briefcase full of hope and a severe case of imposter syndrome. "Your planet shows great potential," said the purple fog being, whose name was apparently Nexara. She had a voice like wind chimes in a horror movie. "We sense such strong emotions from your kind. Fear, hope, determination. It's quite touching." Great. We were touching. That's what you want to hear in your first diplomatic meeting. We're touching to the telepath. That'll play great in the history books. "The Council has prepared a comprehensive integration package," Thrain announced, and something about the way he said package made me think I wasn't going to like what came next. "We believe it will help humanity find its place among the stars." Find its place, not take its place, find it, like we'd lost something and needed help looking for it. I nodded slowly, my diplomatic training kicking in, which mostly consisted of smile and don't insult anyone who can vaporize your planet. But deep down, in that part of my brain that had gotten me through middle school and 3 divorces, I could feel something building. That little voice that says, "You know what? No." But not yet. First, I needed to see exactly how bad this was going to get. Call it morbid curiosity. Call it professional thoroughness. Call it the same instinct that makes you keep watching a horror movie even though you know the babysitter's making terrible life choices. I look forward to reviewing the details, I said, and meant absolutely none of it. Thrain's facets shifted in what might have been a smile. Excellent. We've assigned you a cultural liaison to help with your transition. He's waiting outside. Of course they had, because nothing says you're equals like assigning someone a handler on day one. The cultural liaison turned out to be a guy named Krivix, and if you've ever seen someone trying really hard to hide their disappointment at a work assignment, you've seen Krivix's face when we first met. He had 4 arms, which seemed like overkill, skin that looked like it had been borrowed from a lizard who'd really let himself go, and eyes that suggested he'd rather be literally anywhere else. Marcus Webb, he said, extending one hand while the other 3 hung limp at his sides like they were on strike. I'm Krivix. I'll be helping you understand how things work around here. Lucky you, I said. Yes, he replied with all the enthusiasm of someone describing a root canal. Lucky me. We walked through the station's corridors, which were filled with beings that made the council chamber look understated. A creature made of living crystals floated past us, singing in frequencies that made my teeth hurt. Something that looked like a geometric proof with attitude phased through a wall. This was the galaxy's elite, and I was the guy who'd shown up to the party in jeans. So, I said, because someone had to fill the awkward silence, what's the deal with the hierarchy around here? Krivix's expression suggested I'd just asked him to explain why the sky was blue to a toddler, but he sighed and launched into what was clearly a well-rehearsed speech. At the top you have the transcendent tier, species with reality-altering abilities. The Nexari can read thoughts across star systems. The Tempest can manipulate time. The Voidborn can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Sounds exhausting, I muttered. He ignored me. Then you have the dominant tier, species with significant abilities but limited scope. My people, the Krivorians, have enhanced strength and durability. The Morphari can shapeshift. The Lumeni can manipulate energy. And humans? Krivix paused, and I could see him trying to find a diplomatic way to phrase it. Humans are in the Foundation tier. Foundation. That sounds nice and sturdy. It's what we call species without inherent abilities who contribute through other means. You mean species with nothing special? I didn't say that. You didn't have to, Krivix. Your first 3 arms did. We entered what looked like a cafeteria, except the food was floating and some of it was singing, and I decided not to ask questions I didn't want answered. Sitting at a corner table was a being who looked like she was made of water that had learned to hold a shape, and she was crying. Actually crying. Tears, or whatever the liquid equivalent was for her species, streaming down her face. That's Valara, Krivix said. She's an empath. She can feel the emotions of everyone around her. Is she okay? She's been crying since she heard about humanity's situation. She finds it very sad. Oh good, pity tears. That's exactly what I needed today. We approached the table, and Valara looked up at me with eyes that held more sorrow than a country music festival. You're the human, she said, her voice quivering. You poor thing. I'm fine, actually. But you have no gifts, no abilities. You're just so vulnerable out here in the cosmos. Fresh tears flowed. It's heartbreaking. We've survived this long. Through luck, she sobbed. Pure, tragic luck. Before I could respond, something at the next table shifted, melted, and reformed into an exact copy of me. Except the eyes were on backwards and the mouth was where an ear should be. Is that supposed to be me? I asked. The creature shifted again, correcting the errors. Sorry, said Zune, the shapeshifter. Humans are tricky. You all look so similar. We really don't. If you say so. Zune shifted into something that might have been a chair and might have been having an existential crisis. Krivix led me to a private conference room, which was just as unnecessarily glowy as everything else, and pulled up a holographic display. The Council has prepared a proposal for humanity's integration. The document appeared, and I started reading. With each line, my jaw dropped a little further. Mercy membership, I read aloud. Humanitarian protections, Species in transition status? It's very generous, Krivik said, though his tone suggested even he didn't believe it. This isn't membership. This is galactic welfare. The Council prefers to think of it as supportive integration. They're giving us a participation trophy. A very nice participation trophy. I kept reading, and it got worse. Humans would be allowed to observe Council meetings but not vote on major decisions. We'd receive technology transfers, but only after a review period to ensure we could handle them responsibly. We'd be assigned to the Foundation sector, which the document helpfully noted was far from major shipping lanes and potential conflicts. They're putting us in the corner, I said. They're literally putting humanity in the galactic corner. It's a safe corner, Krivik offered weakly, with juice boxes and nap time, I'm guessing. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the document. Every paragraph was another little condescension, another pat on the head, another, there, you tried your best. This wasn't integration. This was the galaxy's way of saying, thanks for coming. Here's a consolation prize. Try not to break anything. And the worst part? The absolute worst part? They thought they were being kind. They genuinely believed this was generous, that they were doing humanity a favor by letting us sit at the kids' table while the real species handled the important stuff. When do I present Earth's response? I asked, my voice tight. Tomorrow, at the formal council session. Krivik looked at me carefully. Are you all right? You seem tense. I'm fine. I lied through teeth that were doing their best impression of a bear trap. Just excited about tomorrow. The formal council session was held in a chamber so grand it probably had its own weather system. Every seat was filled with representatives of species that could do things I couldn't even properly imagine. The air shimmered with translated languages, projected thoughts, and what I'm pretty sure was just showing off. I sat in the human-designated chair, which I noticed was slightly smaller than the others and positioned just far enough from the main circle to make a point. Subtle. Real subtle. Thrain's crystalline form caught the light as he called the session to order. We gather today to formally welcome humanity to the Galactic Council and finalize the terms of their integration. Around the chamber, beings nodded, murmured, and in one case emitted a color I don't think humans have a word for. Everyone looked so pleased with themselves, so satisfied with their generous offer to the poor little humans. Before we proceed, Thrain continued, does the human representative wish to address the council? I do, I said, standing up. My legs felt steady, which was surprising given that I was about to either make history or end humanity's galactic career before it started. I've reviewed the integration proposal. Excellent, Thrain said. We believe you'll find it most accommodating. Oh, it's something all right. I pulled up my notes, though I barely needed them. I'd been rehearsing this all night in my head. Let me start by saying I appreciate the effort that went into this document. I really do. It must have taken hours to find so many different ways to say, you are useless, while maintaining plausible deniability. The chamber went quiet. Not the good kind of quiet. The kind of quiet that happens right before something expensive breaks. I'm sorry? Thrain said, his facets shifting in confusion. Let me clarify, since apparently I need to spell things out. This isn't an integration proposal. This is a pity package. You're not offering humanity membership. You're offering us a corner to sit in while the real species do the actual work. Nixara, the telepath, leaned forward. We meant no offense, human. We simply wanted to ensure your safety given your limitations. My limitations, I repeated, and I could feel something building in my chest, something that had been compressed by days of condescension and was now ready to explode. Right. Because not being able to read minds makes us what exactly? Stupid? Incompetent? In need of a babysitter? We're concerned for your well-being, Valara said, fresh tears starting. The galaxy can be dangerous for those without defenses. And here's where it gets interesting, I said, my voice taking on an edge I hadn't planned. You all sit here with your telepathy and your shapeshifting and your reality bending, and you think that makes you superior. You think that because we can't shoot lasers from our eyes or phase through walls, we're somehow less than you. That's not what we said, Thrain interjected. No, you didn't say it. You implied it. You suggested it. You wrapped it in diplomatic language and served it with a side of fake sympathy. But the message is crystal clear. And speaking of crystal clear, Thrain, let me tell you something about your proposal. I started pacing, and the words began flowing faster, sharper. You want to put us in the Foundation sector, away from shipping lanes. That's not protection, that's isolation. You want us to observe council meetings but not vote on major decisions. That's not inclusion, that's tokenism. You want to review our ability to handle technology responsibly, like we're children who need permission to use scissors. My voice was rising now, each word hitting harder than the last. And the really insulting part? You think you're doing us a favor. You actually believe that offering us a seat at the kids' table is generous. You're so convinced of your own superiority that it never occurred to you that maybe, just maybe, humanity doesn't need your pity. Human, please calm yourself, Thrain said, but there was something in his voice now. Something uncertain. Calm myself? Why? Because my emotional outburst might disturb your telepathic frequencies? Because my raised voice might harsh the vibe of your nice, peaceful condescension? I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. You want to know what humanity's gift is? You want to know what we bring to this council that none of you can match? I leaned forward, locking eyes with Thrain's faceted form. We're really, really good at calling out garbage when we see it. We've had thousands of years of practice dealing with people who think they're better than everyone else, and we've developed a sophisticated system for handling them. It's called rhetoric, and persuasion, and emotional intelligence, and about 50 other things you species never needed because you could just read each other's minds or reshape reality to avoid conflict. Something was happening in the chamber. Nyxara had her hands pressed to her temples. Valara was sobbing uncontrollably. Even Thrain's crystalline form seemed to be vibrating at a frequency that looked unhealthy. You think we're powerless because we can't bend spoons with our minds? I continued, unable to stop now even if I wanted to. We spent our entire evolutionary history learning to bend each other with words. We became masters of subtext, of implication, of sarcasm and irony, and every other tool you need when you can't just force your will on someone through supernatural means. Zune had shapeshifted into something small and trembling. Krevix was gripping his chair with all four arms, his face pale. So here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice dropping to something quiet and infinitely more dangerous. You're going to take your Mercy membership and your humanitarian protections and your Foundation sector, and you're going to reconsider them. Because humanity didn't come here to be protected. We came here to participate. As equals. And if you can't handle that, if the very idea of treating us with basic respect is too much for your advanced civilizations to manage, then maybe you're not as evolved as you think you are. I stopped talking, and the silence that followed was deafening. Thrain's crystalline form had actual cracks running through it. Nyxara had collapsed in her seat, unconscious. Valara was curled in a ball, overwhelmed. Half the council looked like they'd been hit by a truck made of concepts, and I had absolutely no idea what I'd just done. The next 5 minutes were chaos in the most bureaucratic sense possible. Medical staff, or whatever the galactic equivalent was, rushed into the chamber with equipment that beeped and glowed and did things I didn't have references for. They swarmed around the council members, scanning, treating, and muttering in languages that sounded increasingly concerned. Thrain, still cracked but conscious, pointed a crystalline appendage at me with all the accusatory power of a prosecuting attorney who'd just found the smoking gun. What weapon did you use? Weapon? I looked at my empty hands. I was talking. Impossible. Mere speech cannot cause cognitive overload syndrome. Cognitive what now? A medical technician, something that looked like a floating jellyfish with a medical degree, drifted over. Council Leader Thrain is experiencing severe conceptual fracturing. Nyxara has multiple telepathic feedback loops. Valara is suffering from emotional resonance cascade. And those are just the severe cases. From talking, I repeated, because apparently I needed to hear myself say it to believe it. Krevix stumbled over, all four arms clutching his head. That wasn't talking, Marcus. That was something else. Something we've never encountered before. I gave a speech, an admittedly aggressive speech, but just words. Just words, Krivix repeated, and laughed in a way that sounded slightly unhinged. Just words, he says. The medical jellyfish bobbed closer to me, scanning with lights that made my skin tingle. The human appears unaware of what he's doing, fascinating and terrifying. Can someone please explain what's happening? I demanded, looking around the chamber at the carnage my apparently weaponized diplomacy had caused. Krivix lowered himself into a chair, still holding his head. Okay, I think I understand. Give me a second. He took several deep breaths, which was impressive given that I wasn't sure how many lungs he had. Marcus, how do most species in the galaxy communicate? Talking, telepathy, interpretive dance. Telepathy, he confirmed. Direct mind-to-mind contact. We share thoughts, concepts, emotions directly. There's no ambiguity, no hidden meaning. What you think is what you transmit. Sounds efficient. It is, but it also means we never developed what you did. He gestured at me with two of his arms, while the other two continued their headache support duties. Humans evolved without telepathy. You had to use vocal communication exclusively, and over millions of years, you didn't just develop language. You weaponized it. Weaponized language, I said slowly. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Is it? Think about it. Sarcasm. That thing you do constantly. It's saying one thing while meaning the opposite. To a telepathic species, that's like experiencing two contradictory realities simultaneously. It causes cognitive dissonance. The medical jellyfish bobbed in agreement. The scans confirm it. When the human engaged in what he calls sarcasm, it created paradoxical thought patterns in telepathic receivers. Their brains tried to process both the literal meaning and the intended meaning and couldn't reconcile them. But I'm not telepathic, I pointed out. How am I affecting them? You're not transmitting telepathically, Krivix explained. You're transmitting emotionally, tonally, through body language, through 50 different channels that we pick up unconsciously because we evolved to read any form of communication. And your species mastered all of them because you had to. You couldn't just beam thoughts at each other, so you learned to embed multiple layers of meaning in everything you said. Thrain, being helped to his feet by medical staff, spoke with a voice that resonated with considerably less confidence than before. The human used rhetorical devices, repetition for emphasis, building emotional momentum, strategic pauses. Each technique amplified the psychological impact. I was just making a point, I protested weakly. You were constructing a verbal assault using techniques our species never developed because we never needed them, Valara said, her voice small and shaky. She'd uncurled from her ball but still looked traumatized. Every word was chosen for maximum emotional impact. Every phrase built on the previous one. It was like watching someone who'd turned language itself into a precision weapon. Zune, reformed into something approximating their original shape, added, and the implications. Humans apparently communicate in layers of subtext and implied meaning. When you said mercy membership, you weren't just referencing the document. You were invoking concepts of condescension, pity, inadequacy, all without stating them directly. Our minds tried to unpack all of it simultaneously and nearly crashed. I stood there, in the middle of the Galactic Council chamber, surrounded by traumatized aliens and medical equipment, trying to process what they were telling me. That humanity's complete lack of supernatural abilities had forced us to become so good at regular communication that it was functionally a superpower to species who'd never needed to develop it. So you're saying, I began carefully, that human speech is dangerous to telepathic species? Not just dangerous, the medical jellyfish said. Potentially devastating. Especially when employed by someone skilled in verbal manipulation. Which you apparently are. I'm a mid-level diplomat. I'm not that skilled. Krivix laughed, slightly hysterically. Marcus, you just hospitalized half the Galactic Council with a speech. What do you think your actual skilled communicators could do? Your lawyers? Your negotiators? Your politicians? The implications hit me like a freight train made of irony. Humanity had shown up to the galactic community convinced we were the weak ones, the powerless ones. the species that needed protection, and it turned out we'd been carrying a weapon the entire time. We just didn't know it because everyone we'd ever talked to was human too. "Oh," I said very quietly. "Oh no." "Oh yes," Thrain said, his cracks slowly being repaired by a device that looked like a hot glue gun for crystals. "We've just granted council membership to a species whose basic communication is a weapon of mass destruction. In our defense," I offered, "we didn't know." "That," Krivik said, "somehow makes it worse." 24 hours later, I was back in the council chamber, but the vibe had changed considerably. For starters, half the council members were wearing what could only be described as psychic protective gear. Nexara had some kind of helmet that apparently filtered telepathic input. Valara was behind a transparent barrier marked emotional shielding. Zune had shapeshifted into something with no visible ears. Thrain, his cracks repaired but still visible like scars, sat at the head of the chamber with the body language of someone who'd really rather be anywhere else. "Human Representative Webb, thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "Thanks for inviting me back," I said carefully. The Galactic Council had spent the last day doing emergency research on human communication, and apparently the results had been terrifying enough that there was now a whole section of the station library dedicated to linguistic warfare studies. "We've reconsidered our initial integration proposal," Thrain said, and I noticed his facets didn't catch the light quite as smugly as before. "Have you now?" "Please don't do the sarcasm thing," Valara begged from behind her shield. "I'm still recovering. Sorry." I tried to sound sincere, which was its own kind of irony. "I'm listening." Krivik, who'd apparently been appointed as the official human liaison officer with a significant raise in hazard pay, pulled up a new holographic document. This one was noticeably different from the previous version. For starters, it was titled Humanity Integration Proposal, Revised Edition. Please don't hurt us. I might have imagined that last part, but I don't think I did. "The Council proposes full voting membership for humanity," Thrain announced. "No probationary period, no Foundation sector assignment. Full participation in all Council activities." "That's a significant change," I observed neutrally. "We've also allocated a substantial territory in the Beta Quadrant," Krivik added quickly. "Prime real estate. Near major trade routes, excellent resources. And the technology transfer restrictions." "Gone," Thrain said. "Completely removed. Humanity will have access to all Council technology databases immediately." I scrolled through the document, watching as offer after offer appeared, each one better than the last. It was like watching someone panic bid at an auction where the prize was, "Please don't make the human talk at us again." "We're also proposing," and here Thrain seemed to be choosing his words very carefully, "a new council position, the Office of Linguistic Affairs, to be headed by a human representative of your choosing." "Linguistic Affairs," I repeated. "Communication oversight," Nexara said weakly from behind her helmet. "Mediation services, diplomatic intervention. We've realized that having a species skilled in non-telepathic communication could be valuable." "Valuable," I said, and saw several council members flinch. "Sorry, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm just clarifying." "Yes, valuable," Valara confirmed, her voice muffled by the emotional shielding. "We've been telepathic for so long that we've forgotten how to handle species who aren't. Or conflicts where telepathy might not work. Or situations requiring subtle communication." "You mean lying," I said. "We prefer to call it strategic information management," Thrain said, then added hastily. "But yes, essentially lying, something humans appear to have mastered." Zune, from whatever form they'd taken, added, "We've also been reviewing human entertainment, your fiction, your media. The complexity of your narratives is staggering. You create entire elaborate deceptions for recreational purposes." "You mean movies?" "Psychological warfare training simulations, apparently." I sat back in my chair, which I noticed was now the same size as everyone else's, and positioned properly in the circle. The power dynamic had completely inverted in less than a day. The galaxy had gone from pitying humanity to being actively terrified of what we might say next. "I need to confer with Earth before accepting these terms," I said, keeping my voice level, and watching half the room relax at my non-threatening tone. "Of course," Thrain said. "Take all the time you need. We're not trying to pressure you." "Much," Krevix muttered, then looked startled that he'd said it out loud. "Sorry, I've been around Marcus too much. I'm picking up bad habits." "The worst part," Nexara said, and her telepathic voice in my head was tinged with something like awe, "is that you're not even trying to manipulate us right now. This is just how you naturally communicate, and we still can't read it properly. You could be lying about everything and we wouldn't know." "I'm not lying," I assured her. "But you could be," she insisted. "That's the point. We've been conducting galactic diplomacy based on telepathic honesty for millennia, and now we've encountered a species that can deceive casually, strategically, entertainingly. It's revolutionary and horrifying. We prefer to think of it as versatile communication," I offered. "That's exactly what I mean," Nixar exclaimed. "Even that phrase, versatile communication, it's a euphemism designed to soften the impact of what you're actually saying. You do it automatically. It's like breathing for you." Valara started crying again, though whether from emotional overload or just general stress, I couldn't tell. "I should probably go," I said, standing up. "I'll review these terms and get back to you within 48 hours. 48 hours is acceptable," Thrain said, and his relief was palpable. "Thank you for your consideration, Representative Webb." As I left the chamber with Krivix trailing behind me, I heard someone ask, "Did he just thank us for thanking him? Was that another layer of something?" "I don't know," came the terrified response. "I don't know anymore." The shuttle ride back to Earth gave me plenty of time to think about what had just happened. I'd gone to the Galactic Council expecting to negotiate for scraps, and had come back with a treaty that made humanity one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, and all because we were good at talking. The irony wasn't lost on me. Humanity had spent centuries imagining first contact scenarios. We'd written countless stories about it. In some, we were the warriors. In others, the explorers, the scientists, the underdogs who won through determination and grit. But never in any of our imaginative fiction had we considered that our superpower might be the ability to construct a really devastating argument. When I landed at the United Earth Government headquarters in Geneva, I was met by a delegation that included the Secretary General, the heads of all major space agencies, and about 40 people whose titles I didn't have time to memorize. They hustled me into a conference room that was significantly less impressive than the Galactic Council chamber but had better coffee. "Report," the Secretary General said, which I appreciated because I really didn't want to start with small talk. I spent the next hour explaining everything. The initial proposal, my speech, the discovery of humanity's linguistic weaponry, and the revised treaty. By the time I finished, the room was completely silent. "So let me make sure I understand," the Secretary General said slowly. "We're dangerous because we're good at conversation? Specifically, we're dangerous because we're good at layered communication. Subtext, implications, emotional manipulation through word choice, rhetorical devices. All the things we developed because we couldn't read minds. And this makes us valuable, terrifying, and in high demand, apparently." I pulled up my messages on the tablet. "Since the revised treaty was drafted, I've received 47 requests from various species for human diplomatic services. They want us for negotiations, mediation, legal representation, basically anything that involves convincing someone of something." The head of the Asian Space Coalition leaned forward. "They want to hire us as lawyers?" "More or less. Turns out when your entire civilization is built on telepathic honesty, you're not great at adversarial proceedings. Humans, on the other hand, invented the legal profession thousands of years ago and have been refining it ever since." "This is insane," someone muttered. "This is humanity," I corrected. "We took our biggest weakness, our complete lack of supernatural abilities, and turned it into something nobody else could match. We got so good at regular communication that it became irregular to everyone else." Over the next few weeks, the treaty was ratified, and humanity began its integration into the galactic community properly this time. And the results were exactly as chaotic as you'd expect. Human lawyers became the most sought-after representatives in the galaxy. Our negotiators were hired for trade deals that had been stalled for decades. Our diplomats were brought in to mediate conflicts that telepathic species couldn't resolve, because everyone could sense everyone else's positions, and nobody could bluff or compromise. We even started exporting entertainment. Turns out that alien species found human fiction absolutely fascinating because it was built on deception. Mystery novels, thrillers, political dramas, all of it relied on concealing information and revealing it strategically. To telepathic species, this was like watching magic tricks that defied their understanding of reality. The galactic economy shifted. Earth went from being the pitied newcomer to being a major power in about 3 months. We didn't do it with weapons or advanced technology. We did it by being really, really good at talking people into things. And me? I got promoted to Director of the Office of Linguistic Affairs, which meant I was now responsible for making sure humans didn't accidentally traumatize alien species with casual conversation. It was like being a diplomat, a therapist, and a hostage negotiator all at once. I was back at the council station 6 months after my initial visit, and the difference was remarkable. When I walked through the corridors now, aliens literally cleared the path. Not out of fear exactly, though there was some of that. More out of respect mixed with healthy caution. Like you'd treat someone who could juggle chainsaws, technically impressive, but you'd rather not get too close. Krevix had become my genuine friend, which surprised both of us. He'd gotten over his initial disappointment at being assigned to humanity, and now seemed to take pride in being the one who'd figured out our secret first. We met for lunch, or whatever the galactic equivalent was, in the same cafeteria where I'd first met the sobbing Valara. "So," Krevix said, settling into his chair with all 4 arms holding different beverages, "I heard you talked the Zentari into a peace treaty yesterday." "They'd been at war for 200 years, I said, sipping something that tasted like vanilla had a fight with lightning. 2 telepathic species, each one completely certain they were right, each one able to sense the other's absolute conviction, stalemate forever. And you solved it in 6 hours. I introduced them to the concept of agreeing to disagree, blew their minds, apparently literally in one case, had to take a medical break." Krevix laughed, the sound echoing from all 4 of his throat chambers. "You know what the best part is? The galaxy spent millennia pitying species without telepathy. We thought they were limited, handicapped, struggling to communicate. Turns out we were the limited ones. I wouldn't go that far. No, think about it. We can share thoughts perfectly, but we never learned nuance. We never developed persuasion, negotiation, all the skills you need when you can't just dump your entire mental state into someone else's brain. You humans had to become masters of communication because you had no other choice." Valara approached our table, no longer behind an emotional shield, though she still looked wary. "Marcus, I wanted to apologize for my reaction during your first visit. You were overwhelmed. It's fine." "I was condescending," she corrected. "I felt sorry for you because I couldn't sense your thoughts, and I assumed that made you lesser. I was wrong. You're not limited, you're just different, and somehow more sophisticated because of it." "I appreciate that," I said, meaning it. "And I'm sorry I accidentally weaponized language at you." "Are you, though?" Krevix asked with a grin. "Because you've been using it pretty effectively in negotiations. That's different. That's intentional and controlled." "Is it? Or have you just gotten better at recognizing what you were always doing naturally?" Before I could answer, Thrain's holographic form appeared above our table, which was apparently a thing he could just do now. "Representative Webb, I apologize for the interruption. The Council has a situation that requires your expertise." "What kind of situation?" "The Harmonics have filed a complaint against the Vexari. They claim the Vexari are engaging in deceptive trade practices. And that's unusual because neither species believed deception was possible until they met humans. Now they're accusing each other of it, but neither side actually understands what deception means. We need you to mediate." I sighed and stood up. The job that never ends. What does deceptive trade practice even look like when both parties are telepathic? That's what we need you to determine. You're the expert now. As I followed Thrain's hologram toward the mediation chambers, Krevix called after me. "Don't break anyone's brain this time." "No promises," I called back. The mediation took 3 hours, And by the end of it, I determined that what the harmonics called deceptive trade practices was actually just the Vexari not volunteering information that hadn't been asked for. To them, it was withholding. To humans, it was literally just normal business practice. I spent another hour explaining the difference between lying, withholding, omission, and strategic information sharing. The looks of existential horror on their faces suggested I'd just explained that gravity was optional. That evening, I stood in my quarters on the station, looking out at the stars. Earth was out there somewhere, spinning away with 8 billion people who had no idea they'd been walking around with a superpower their entire lives. We'd always thought we needed to be stronger, faster, more powerful to matter in the universe. Turns out, we just needed to be ourselves. We needed to be the species that learned to wrap meaning in layers, to say one thing while implying another, to construct arguments that could change minds without changing reality. The galaxy had powers we'd never have. Telepathy, shapeshifting, time manipulation, all the supernatural abilities we'd dreamed about in our fiction. But we had something they didn't, something they'd never needed to develop. We had words, and we knew how to use them. My communicator chimed. It was a message from the Secretary General. Marcus, we're sending the first wave of human diplomats to their galactic assignments next week. Law school applications have increased by 300%. Business schools are adding courses on alien negotiation tactics. You've changed everything. I typed back, I just talked to some aliens. They changed everything by listening. But that wasn't quite true, and I knew it. I hadn't just talked. I'd employed every trick humanity had developed over millennia of having to convince each other without the benefit of mind reading. Rhetoric, emotion, logic, implication, all of it deployed naturally because that's what humans do. We'd spent so long looking up at the stars and wondering what our place would be among species more powerful than us. Turns out our place was exactly where we'd always been, right in the middle of things, talking our way through problems, negotiating solutions, and occasionally weaponizing sarcasm when the situation called for it. Another message came through, this one from Krevix. Drinks tomorrow? Zune wants to practice shapeshifting into humans and needs someone to tell him when he gets it wrong. He's currently stuck with his face upside down. I smiled and typed back, sure, sounds fun. Fun. 6 months ago, I'd arrived at this station convinced humanity was about to be relegated to the galactic kiddie table. Now I was having drinks with friends who'd learned that underestimating humans was a really bad idea. The galaxy had called humanity powerless. They'd offered us pity and protection, assuming we'd need both. They'd been so certain of our inadequacy that they'd prepared an entire welfare program for us. And then we opened our mouths. Turned out the species without supernatural powers had developed something better. We'd turned communication itself into an art form, a weapon, a tool that could reshape conflicts without reality bending or mind reading. We'd made words powerful because we'd had no other choice. The galaxy was learning what every human had always known. We're not powerless. We're just playing a different game. And we'd been practicing for thousands of years. I looked out at the stars again, at all those civilizations with their incredible abilities, their telepathy and their time travel and their interdimensional existence. They were powerful in ways we'd never be. But we were persuasive, and in the end, that might be the most powerful ability of all. My communicator chimed one more time. An emergency request from the Council. The Morphari and the Lumeni were having a dispute that was about to escalate into conflict. They needed human mediation immediately. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Another day, another crisis that needed talking through. Another opportunity for humanity to do what we did best. We'd show them what powerless really meant, one word at a time.